Hello and welcome to Spotlight on Jackson County. WKFK and myself, the host Doug Mansfield, are very, very, very glad and we appreciate our special guest being here today. He is Congressman Gene Taylor. Congressman, welcome to the show. You're a friend of mine, you're a personal friend of mine. I want to thank you for being here and taking your time.
I just wish you would have told me the dress code. I wouldn't have got all dressed up. If I would have known, I could have got by on a shirt.
I'll tell you what, well, we're going to give you a shirt before you leave. How's that?
Okay.
Congressman, how about let's get started with talking about the shipyard in Pascagoula.
We just finished the House version of the defense bill, and we're very, very happy to report that because of my work and others, we've put language in where the shipyard can enter into a multi-year procurement contract for DDG-51s, the world's best destroyer. We had a DDG-51 in the budget. We had another LPD in the budget. We had advanced funding for an additional LPD in the budget. And so that should provide a lot of job security for the folks at Northrop Grumman for a long time. We're continuing along the track of building DDG-51s. Probably at least for the next decade, we're going to reduce the number of DD-1000s that the nation will buy to only 3. It's a good ship, but it's an unaffordable ship. It's coming in somewhere, and that's the problem. Anywhere between $5 and $7 billion for one ship. Got a lot of good ideas in it, in particular the gun that could probably hit this room from 70 miles away. But that's a very expensive platform to be carrying that one gun. With the 51s, the advantages are you get economies of scale everywhere. You can have a large fleet, probably 70 to 90 of them. So you're training a sailor who can be a radar man, a helmsman, an engineer on one of 70 identical ships. You get economies of scale when you build them. You're buying 70 sets of propellers, 70 sets of engines, 70 sets of everything. And above all, due to a missile threat from China, the DDG-51 can be modified with a new radar that can tie into all the electronics into the self-defense measures and defend itself from that threat, whereas the DD-1000, because it's a stealthy ship, you just can't put a great big radar on top of a stealthy ship and still have a stealthy ship. So we think Admiral Roughhead convinced me that this was the way to go. I'm in total agreement that this is where we need to be going as a nation. And the other thing we're going to continue to push on is see to it that the next generation of cruiser is nuclear powered. Every ship uses about 3 times, every generation of ship uses about 3 times more electricity than the one it's replacing. The future of weapons is energy-directed weapons. So you've got that built on board, and then with the more powerful radars, you've got all of those things that you need with a nuclear power plant, and the added bonus is you don't have to call up Hugo Chavez or the Ayatollah for a refill. You go 30 years, you've got all the fuel you need to get from here to there for 30 years. And if you think about it, the cruiser exists to protect the carrier. The carrier can go for 30 years without refueling to get from here to there, but the ships that are protecting the carrier have to refuel every 3 to 5 days. That's a vulnerability. And again, the DDG-51 is a great ship, but it's a gas guzzler. So if we can make the next ships that we build nuclear powered for that cruiser, then you've got everything that you need, but above all, the ability to get from here to there for 30 years without having to call up Hugo Chavez for a refill.
Hugo Chavez.
Well, and again, so if you think about it, most of the fuel that we get comes from places where they're not necessarily our friends. And so we want to address that vulnerability. And so the next step is we want to get this yard here in Jackson County nuclear certified. Again, it was nuclear certified in the past. They let that lapse. And so I see that as a very, very good thing for the yard. And we'll continue to make investments in the yard, both on the national level. And again, I take great pride in that 1/2 of the surface fleet for the United States Navy was built right here in South Mississippi. That's something we all should be very, very proud of, and we're going to continue doing that.
Well, without you, Gene, we wouldn't have that happening.
Well,
you're a big voice for that in South Mississippi.
It's taken a while,
a debt of gratitude,
but I am now the chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee, and we want to see to it that we're taking care of our yards here and around the nation. And we're also very, very lucky to have former Governor Mavis as our Secretary of the Navy now. So I think the stars are lining up. And of course, we've always had the great help of Senator Cochran and Senator Wicker over in the Senate. So we make a good team.
Another thing, Gene, is the all perils insurance. How's that fleshing out? How's that
Well, you
working?
mentioned something that you were mad at Secretary Napolitano at. Let's add two things to that list. The other thing that she did that I think was pretty boneheaded was she came out against the All Perils bill. I will be meeting with her when we go back after the 4th in an effort to get her to be supportive of the idea. Just last week in the Mississippi Supreme Court, one of the, I think it was Nationwide Insurance Company, admitted that if a house was 95% destroyed by wind, and there's only 5% of the house left, and then a wave came along and knocked down the last 5% of that house, that they wouldn't pay the wind claim. Not one penny was the attorney's quote. Now, I encourage people to go to my website to see the attorney saying not one penny, even though it had 95% wind damage. So what we're trying to do so that people like Senator Lott and Federal Judge Lou Garola and moms and dads and football coaches everywhere don't have to hire an engineer, don't have to hire an attorney, is let you buy one policy. You buy your National Flood Insurance policy. Then as an option to that, you get your wind coverage. You build your house the way you're supposed to. You pay your premiums. If the storm comes along and your house is destroyed or substantially destroyed, you're going to get paid. You don't have to hire a lawyer. You don't have to hire an engineer. You've done your part. Our nation's going to do their part. And the more we look into this, we realize that just the incredible ripoff of the taxpayers that took place in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, when the insurance companies, by failing to pay, stuck the taxpayer with the bill. First, number one is typical homeowner's policy said if your home was destroyed to the part where you could not live in it, they would pay to put you up. Well, when they denied your claim, they're not going to pay to put you up either. So who paid that bill? The taxpayers. Taxpayers purchased 42,000 FEMA trailers just for the people of Mississippi at an average cost of $15,000 per trailer to buy them, another $16,000 to set them on the piece of property. That's $31,000 times 42,000. That's $1.3 billion just in Mississippi to put people up that the insurance company should have paid. Then there was a homeowner's grants up to $150,000 or the amount of the damage, whichever was less. But the first provision of the homeowner's grant was you had insurance and you didn't get paid. So that's 2 times the taxpayers got stuck. And then thirdly, just the whole idea that people would have to hire a lawyer, would have to hire an engineer to get paid. It was just wrong. We're trying to change that. And again, the Bush administration was not very helpful. We did get a bill through the House last year. We did not get it through the Senate. I have every confidence we will get it through the House this year. And one of the things that I'm hoping to do, again, the second week of July when we go back, is to get Secretary Napolitano to drop her objections to the bill because it's the right thing to do for the taxpayer and certainly the right thing to do for the people of coastal America. And I would remind people that 1/2 of all Americans live within 50 miles of a coastline. So this isn't just a South Mississippi issue. This is a coastal America issue, and it involves more than half of all the people in America.
Well, after all those figures you just laid out there for us, James, it seems like the all perils option would have been a whole lot cheaper than what actually happened.
It was, and that's what is crazy about the Bush administration objection to it. It's crazy about the Obama administration objection to it. The nation already got stuck with the bill. One of the things that we say in our bill is it has to pay for itself. They have to collect enough in premiums to pay out what they're going to pay as far as settlements. But you're spreading the risk all around coastal America. The chances of all 3 Mississippi counties getting hit one day has happened 3 times in my lifetime. The chances of every county in America, coastal county, getting hit the same day, that's not going to happen. If it does, it's called Armageddon, and don't worry about your insurance payment.
Yeah.
It's
so over then.
It's over. So this is doing what insurance is supposed to do, spreading the risk. Why the insurance companies fight it is beyond me because they don't want the business. They have pushed the obligation of providing wind insurance off to the individual states through the wind pools. Every coastal state has had to form their own wind pool. It puts the states out there with huge liabilities. They pay a fortune in reinsurance. Many of those companies, the same companies that won't sell you or I as an individual a policy for wind insurance, sell the state wind pools reinsurance. It gets better. Not only do they sell them reinsurance, but they sell them reinsurance out of the Caymans, out of the Bahamas, out of Jamaica. So if you had trouble getting State Farm in Illinois to pay your claim, or the Hartford Insurance in Hartford, Connecticut to pay your claim, just think about how much fun it's going to be for the state to get that claim paid out of Jamaica, the Bahamas, the Caymans. It's not going to happen. It'll be tied up in international courts for the rest of your lifetime. So again, this is dealing with the one entity that we know was fair to everybody after the storm, and that was the federal flood insurance. They paid every claim that I know of. They paid it promptly. And lastly, we're trying to avoid this conflict of interest where your local insurance agent sells you your flood policy. No problem there. He gets a commission on it. We don't have to hire a bunch of extra federal employees. The conflict comes in where, under the existing law, that same local insurance agent gets to go on your property and decide, did it flood or did the wind do it? If he says it flooded, that means the federal flood insurance pays. But if he says the wind did it, it means his company has to pay. Doug, you and I, we're not so young anymore, but we were both at one point in our lives young company men. So imagine yourself, you're 26 again, you're the company man, you go out on the property and say, gee, I can blame it on the flood because if I say the wind did it, I won't get my next promotion. I won't get my Christmas bonus. I may even lose my job. And so what did they do? Every time they stuck the taxpayer with the bill rather than asking the private sector to pay for it. So for all of these reasons. And then lastly, we want to eliminate, and it's something that was before the Mississippi Supreme Court just last week, something buried in that policy called concurrent causation. In my case, had about a 20-something page policy. It was one paragraph on page 10. And it said, if any two events happen concurrently, then my insurance company, which was State Farm, I've since dropped them, wouldn't pay. Which meant, we know that the Navy has modeled the storm. There were 4 hours of hurricane force winds before the water ever got there. So if after 4 hours of hurricane force wind, a house had one 2x4 left standing, then a wave came along, knocked down that last, because the wind did it. Then a wave comes along, knocks down that last 2x4. They're calling that a concurrent event and saying they don't have to pay at all. And just last week before the Supreme Court, they pretty well said just that. And so we want to get that policy, we want to get that little statement out of people's policies so that you don't have to be a U.S. attorney or a federal judge to figure out what's in your insurance policy. It ought to be pretty straightforward. You build your house right, you pay your premiums, something bad happens, you get paid.
Gene, we're going to have to take a short break.
Okay.
We're going to take a real short break here on Spotlight on Jackson County. Don't go away. We'll be back with more with Congressman Gene Taylor. Welcome back to Spotlight on Jackson County. If you want to go to Congressman Taylor's website, we're going to have it up on the screen for you. There you can read a whole lot more about what he's got going up there. I mean, I'm learning a lot myself, and I'm going to go to the website as soon as I get off the set today. But if you want to go to the website and read more about it, we have it on the screen for you. Welcome back, Gene. Let's talk about something that's really a hot issue in the United States today. That's cap and trade. That has the potential of, in my opinion, and I might be wrong, but really hurting a lot of people.
Oh, I tell you what, it was a dumb idea on top of a dumb idea. Let's start with the first dumb idea, and that was the idea that a factory, a smokestack somewhere, takes the steps to have less of pollution than it has to. And then they can trade those allowances to a factory somewhere else in America that's dirtier than it should be. Historically, that factory that is dirtier than it should be has been in the rural South. Historically, the factory that is cleaner than it has to be has been a place like California. So they get the credits. Someone in South Mississippi or the South gets the carcinogens. It gets better. And then they can trade these allowances. Well, who is going to trade those allowances? The same folks who manipulated the price of gasoline up over $4 a gallon last summer on the over-the-counter trading. The same folks who are going to trade these allowances. So you take a dumb idea as far as the pollution, make it even worse by having the guys on Wall Street being able to trade these for value, drives up the cost, obviously, of that product. And who eventually pays is the consumer. So I voted against it. I have been against it from day one. We thought we had it beat. It was for the longest time. The reason they did not bring it up is we had the votes against it. It only passed by a vote or two in the House. Now it goes to the Senate. Historically, the Senate moves on things slower than the House, and so I'm hoping that they will either completely kill it or modify it to a place to where it just is nowhere near as onerous as it was when it went before the House. But it's I don't know, just a dumb idea that I really wish the House had not passed last week.
Gene, you always have some really interesting words to describe bonehead, dumb idea. I really like that. You just bring it down to a level everybody can understand.
It's important to speak in terms that folks understand.
Dumb ideas. Nationalized health care. That's probably a dumb idea in my opinion.
Well,
how do you
the
feel
first
about it?
thing
I know
is,
it hasn't passed.
No, and people need to remember when they say there already is substantial nationalized health care. If someone has served their country for 20 years or more in the military, their health care is paid for the rest of their life. During the term of their service, their health care is paid for. All guardsmen and reservists, because of an effort that I had in the House, all guardsmen and reservists, their health care is paid for during their entire service. It used to be only after they came home from a deployment. We all know, particularly in your family, that there's really only three types of guardsmen and reservists: those who have been to Iraq, those who are in Iraq, or those who are going to Iraq, and throw in Afghanistan as well. So because they are used to such a large extent, we wanted to reward them and their employers by giving them health insurance, and so we have health insurance for them. We have the VA healthcare system for folks who have served less than 20 years but who have served their country honorably. They're eligible. And we have Medicaid for less fortunate financially Americans, heavily subsidized by the nation, $3 for every $1 that the state puts up in the case of Mississippi. And then we have Medicare for senior citizens, as a rule, 65 and older. So that's a pretty good portion of the population that's already getting health care. The trick is, how are we going to pay for the promises that have already been made? And they are very extensive promises, and they're expensive promises, but they're promises that were made, promises that have to be kept. I'm of the opinion we as a nation don't need to be making any new promises until we know we can pay for the existing ones. Medicare is scheduled to stop collecting more than we collect. We still collect a little bit more in taxes than we actually pay in premiums, paying costs for Medicare. But in around 2016, that's going to cross it. That year we're going to spend more on medical services for Medicare than we collect in taxes. So we're already on one collision course with cost. The other thing is just a very sad fact that for you, for me, for a 2-year-old kid that we're going to run into in Walmart in a little while, 90% of a typical person's health care costs occur in the last 6 weeks of their lives. So for 300 million Americans, that bill has not come due yet, but we know it's going to come due. The other thing that's happening is demographically, our nation is getting older. When my dad was a teenager, there were 19 working people for every one retiree. Right now, there's only 3 working people for every retiree. If I'm lucky enough to live to retirement age, then there'll be only 2 working people for every retiree. So all of these things are working against us, even fulfilling the promises that have already been made, which is why I don't want, as a nation, I don't want to see our nation making any new promises that we can't afford to keep. So that's where I am. You know, the details of it are pretty sketchy at the moment. I'm a big believer in let's read the bill before I vote on it, and that bill has not been written yet. And so I know that you're hearing some things and you have concerns about some of the things you're hearing, and that makes perfect sense. But until it's actually in the form of a bill, there won't be a vote in Congress.
One of the things we're hearing is about requiring small businesses, just like the one that we're part of right now, required to provide health insurance for their employees. I mean, we couldn't afford it.
Right. No, it's
especially in today's economy.
Right.
We just simply couldn't.
No, we just at the moment we do not need any new governmental mandates on the private sector. We've already lost so many jobs because of NAFTA, because of CAFTA, because of most favored nation status with China. I do want to remind people that I voted against all 3. But the bottom line is when you take away tariffs, and it's so much, you know, you're paying someone, what, 50 cents an hour in Mexico, you're paying someone 30 cents an hour in China, you're paying somebody $8, $9 in Mississippi even for a lower paying job. Well, guess what the employers did? They went overseas. So we don't want to create any more reasons for the employers that have stayed with us to relocate overseas, and this would be one of those reasons. And the idea of trying to help every American is not a bad idea. The truth of the matter is that help is there right now. If you or I exhaust all of our income, then you become eligible for Medicare. So again, it is a safety net. You lose everything before you get to that safety net, but that safety net's there right now. If you or I live long enough to be 65, that coverage will be there. You as a veteran are eligible for the VA healthcare system. I am not, because I was reserved when the rules were different, but you're eligible right now. Well, and then, of course, if you had done 20 years, then you'd be eligible for the rest of your life.
But this is going to drive the national debt
sure
up way beyond what it is.
No, Doug, again, you keep asking me to defend something I'm not for, so I'm not going to defend something I'm not for. I believe, but I'm very, very much aware of that, and I'm very much aware that, you know, I'm scared to death of these huge deficits we've been running. I'm still angry, for want of a better word, that when George Bush took office, we were running an annual operating surplus, however slight, on an annual operating basis. And in the span of 8 years, he took that and doubled the national debt with boneheaded things like the prescription drug benefit, that a great idea that no one said how you're going to pay for it, cutting taxes, increasing spending all at the same time. Well, all that does is run you in the red. And I don't want to stick my kids or my grandkids with these bills.
I don't want either.
Singular. Only got one grandchild, but another on the way.
Well, I hadn't got any yet,
okay.
But the possibility exists.
Yes, and congratulations. Doug's son got married just this weekend.
Yes, so he did, and unfortunately, he is one of those guardsmen you referred to that are going to be sent somewhere overseas again.
Well, we're very, very lucky to have him serving us.
North Korea, Gene, we got a real big threat from North Korea. What is your view on how the nation should handle that?
I'm going to quote a CIA briefing that I got. And so I asked him, why in a nation where people are starving to death does someone have a 1 million-man army, have 100,000 of them in special forces, have 13,000 artillery tubes and rocket launchers that could hit Seoul? Why is it that a nation that is just eking by, does someone then, after doing all this conventionally, go out and spend all the money it takes to build a nuclear weapon? The CIA guy said, Kim is sort of like the high school nerd, and I'm using his words, not mine, that he doesn't get much respect, that people look at him as a geek. He's running a poor country, so therefore it's no prestige there. But if that high school nerd goes to his dad's dresser drawers, takes his .38, sticks it in his pocket and brings it to gun to school, he's still a nerd, but he's a nerd with a gun. People aren't going to tease him. People are going to know his name. They're going to be aware of him, and they're going to give him, some respect because he's got that gun. They think that the nuclear program that Kim is developing is sort of like grabbing that .38 revolver out of Dad's desk drawer and bringing it to school. He's still got a dirt poor country, but he's got a nuclear weapon. And let's face it, that's why you're concerned about him. You're not that concerned about the 1 million-man army. You're not that concerned about the 100,000 guys in special forces, even though that's quite a threat. You're not that concerned about the 13,000 artillery tubes. But when he got that nuclear weapon, he got your attention. And so, again, they think that's why he's doing it. Interestingly enough, they have pointed to a trend where he fires off a test missile on our holidays. And so we are expecting one on the 4th of July, and it's like this, again, it's like this nerd with a nuclear weapon. He'll probably fire that test. I'm predicting on the 4th of July. It's not a coincidence. What I remind people is that we have over 13,000 nuclear weapons. This guy at best has 4 or 5. We could hit his backyard with multiple weapons tonight if we wanted to. He cannot yet hit any part of the United States, including, he can't hit Hawaii yet. But it is a threat. It's one of the reasons why, going back to the first segment, that I'm really happy that we're going to continue building DDG-51s. That platform can be modified to have, and some of them already have been, theater high altitude defense. If you think about it, the beauty of putting your missile defense on a ship is that you can move it around to get closer to the threat, get between us and the threat, whether the threat is North Korea, whether the threat is Cuba again, whether the threat would, again, fill in the blanks where it could be. If you have a fixed system, particularly in Europe, the problem becomes that your host country can ask you to leave. So you've spent all this money building infrastructure, and then your host country asks you to leave. The beauty of having it on a ship is you just move it around the oceans to where it needs to be. So I'm very comfortable with the idea of having our national missile defense on ships for that reason, that we're not wasting money on fixed infrastructure. And the other thing, quite honestly, is our foes are not stupid. If I was going to attack the United States, I probably would not use a missile. A missile leaves a calling card. You know where it came from. There are about 13 million cargo containers a year coming to our country. Less than 1% of them are inspected. This is something everybody knows. If I was going to try to hurt a lot of Americans, I'd put a weapon of mass destruction in one of those cargo containers and sneak it in, as opposed to using the missile. Or put something like a Scud launcher in the cargo hold of a tramp steamer and approach us from the Atlantic coast rather than the Pacific coast, because we're focusing this way. And again, a clever foe is going to come at you where you're not looking.
We've got about 30 seconds,
Okay.
Gene. Is there anything you want to leave our viewers with
No.
today?
Well,
Gene's going to be back, folks. He's going to be back in August.
Well, we ought to be very, very happy that, again, the shipyard's doing great. They're producing phenomenal ships. That's why it's easy to keep putting ships in the budget. They're going to be made at Northrop because they do a great job. We're getting a little bit better every day on hurricane recovery. We're going to stay after it on insurance reform to get the price of insurance down, get the coverage up, and above all, let people know they're going to get paid should they file a claim. And we are getting better as a nation every day. We have to strive to do that, to honor your service, to honor your son's service, and all the other men and women who served our country so honorably.
Well, thank you so much, Gene.
Thank you very much. Next time I'm not wearing a coat.
Oh, okay. I want to thank Congressman Taylor for being here. I consider him a personal friend, and I know he's taking time out from a very, very busy day, and we want to thank you for watching Spotlight on Jackson County. Join us again next week, and don't forget, he will be back here in August. Thank you.